Thank you, Roberta. And thank you for the kind introduction. I am a mussel farmer from Arklow in County Wicklow. And I suppose that's why this topic is particularly important to me. But it's more important on the wider national scale to the industries of aquaculture and fisheries. Because this year, it's not moving. This year, our first national Marine Spatial Plan was published. And what that means is that policy was made that would govern all of the sea area that's owned by Ireland off our shores. And aquaculture and fisheries are obviously two very prominent industries within our marine area. The objective of a Marine Spatial Plan is to organise the marine area and the activities within it, so the various different businesses, so that they work together in an integrated way and achieve ecological, economic, and social objectives. The problem was, and the reason for my topic this year, is that when that plan was published, there was a bill created to support and bring to life our National Marine Spatial Plan. And unfortunately, aquaculture and fisheries were specifically excluded from that bill. And as we move forward now, that is currently under consultation. And as we move forward, the concerns of the fishing and aquaculture industry need to be understood. One of the main concerns is that all other marine activity outside of aquaculture and fisheries under this bill will have a streamlined licensing process. But aquaculture and fisheries are notorious for lengthy licensing processes, and it's a clear difference then between our seafood producing industries and all other industries that would enter into the marine space. And so fishermen, consequently, are reluctant to invest further into their businesses, and aquaculture farmers are uncertain about their future. They're worried, fishermen are worried that their fishing ground is going to be depleted, that new industries are going to be welcomed, and the area that they have traditionally and historically fished is going to be removed from them. And so it's a particularly relevant topic at this time. And I have a core message from my research, from my report. And that is that it's time. It's time for fisheries and aquaculture producers to take their seat at the table when policy is being created in their space. And I'd like to give the message that my research has shown that they need to be confident in themselves, in their unique skills that relate to the marine area being planned for, because it has value. Their local knowledge has value. And it will hugely increase the success of any marine spatial plan. As Karen has mentioned, this year is unlike other years. We didn't get to travel. But, it was okay. We learned a new way. And instead of embarking upon my global travel, I embarked upon my global virtual travel, focused on identifying real-life, living examples of best practice in marine spatial planning so that I could bring back a message of hope for aquaculture and fisheries in Ireland and across Europe. In that travel, I virtually traveled to Canada and Poland, United States, South Africa, Netherlands, and Germany. And in all of those countries, there was a relevant case study that was either positive towards integrating aquaculture and fisheries into marine spatial planning, or the reverse. So there are contrasting case studies within my report. Other countries that I visited virtually were, actually some of them were physically, were Norway, New Zealand, Spain, Scotland, Brazil, UK, Australia, and Chile. There were some really interesting events along the way as well. And some of the highlights were attendance at 12 UN high-level dialogue events. I presented at the Agri-F Food Summit, the Gender and Youth Macro Committee, as well as to the UN high-level dialogue in relation to seafood production and how it can play its part in food security. I want to highlight one really positive case study for you guys today. And you can read all about it in my report. But it's a Canadian case study. and it's in relation to the Northern Shelf bioregion. And in this case study, the federal government wanted to create a network of marine protected areas. And this case study has really been highlighted today to demonstrate that when communities are very aware of the value that they can bring to marine spatial planning, that awareness can help to drive a bottom-up approach to development of the plan. And it really benefits not just the current marine users of the space, but the overall efficacy of the plan itself. In this scenario in Canada, they aimed to create marine protected areas that would protect 275 ecological features and locations. It would protect the First Nations cultural locations, and it would achieve an evenly distributed network of no-take zones. And that kind of does what it says on the tin. You're not allowed to take any fish out of the no-take zones. And so it was going to have a direct impact on fisheries and aquaculture. The federal government produced a draft scenario to show people what this would look like if it were to be implemented. And it would have, on a commercial level, it would have reduced commercial fishing by 49%, which equates to $91.6 million. It would have impacted 27 fisheries and thousands of fishermen in that region, and fisherwomen, I should say. And so it would have had a huge impact. The reason I highlight this case study is because something different happened in Canada. It doesn't happen generally when fishermen are faced with new marine plans that would impact them. 4 men came together: Brian Moss, Grant Dovey, Mike Atkins, and Bruce Turris. And they're hugely inspirational to me. All of these men have, together, over 100 years' experience in fishing in that area. They had skills across ecology, biology, and fisheries, and resource management. And all of the members really loved the industry of fishing in that area, and they decided that they would do something about the draft scenario. They created the Marine Planning team. And it's an example of what happens when fisheries and aquaculture do take their seat at the table. It's successful marine planning, successful engagement that gives ownership to fisheries and aquaculture of the marine space. The Marine Planning team engaged with all fisheries and aquaculture operators, and together they designed a new plan. They used a program called Sea Sketch, which helps people to visualize what's happening out there at sea, which is not always an easy concept for people's minds to come around. The results of the plan that they developed together were that they met and exceeded all of the environmental and ecological aims of the draft scenario. They reduced the financial impact on fisheries by 77% to the tune of €70.8 million. But what was particularly interesting about this case study for me is that it was a clear indication that fishermen were prepared and ready to take the longer-term view on their businesses, to protect the environment, reduce their fishing ground, and to protect their livelihood as it moved forward in a very positive way. Also within my report, I cover the topics of a marine planning literature review. I discuss what Ireland's Marine Spatial Plan looks like and what it's about. I cover an overview of governance, various different types of governance that is used in marine spatial planning around the world. There are 6 case studies. One of those is the Canadian case study that I shared with you today, but there are contrasting case studies alongside that would show what happens when stakeholders like aquaculture and fisheries are not properly consulted when a plan is being made for the space that they operate within. I also carried out a review of all tools available to policymakers and stakeholders in the marine environment when they are engaged with a marine planning initiative. And I wanted to create something that was really very practical for fishermen and aquaculture. And so I created a 1-page roadmap, which really brings together the entire report and suggests how to appropriately engage from a few different sides. One, from fisheries to marine planners, from planners to fisheries and aquaculture, but also from fisheries and aquaculture to new industry that would look to use the marine space alongside them, because the marine space is dynamic. It's always changing, and fishermen and aquaculture operators need to be able to understand that and move with that in a positive way while protecting their business as well. There are multiple recommendations in my report, and I'm happy to say that I believe it's live today on the website. So if anybody wants to go and read my report, I'd be happy with that. My main recommendations, however, is obviously my core message again, and that is that fisheries and aquaculture must realise the value in their knowledge and engage with planning. But also that engagement needs to be informed. There needs to be socioeconomic impact studies for the various different sectors of the marine space so that transparent engagement that is beneficial to all can be had. There's a huge potential in the marine space for mixed use, and this must be considered. In fact, the European directive that insisted we create a marine spatial plan indicates that we should have an integrated marine plan that covers all marine uses. There needs to be better access to funds and longer time periods within which to carry out stakeholder engagement to enact marine spatial planning. In the Canadian example, it took a further 1.5 years for them to complete the new map, the new plan. But it takes that time to build trust between the policymakers and the fishermen and the aquaculture industries, so that they can come together and have a balanced discussion around how you might balance the conflicts of the marine space, because there is give and take at all times. There needs to be better knowledge sharing between marine spatial planning and terrestrial planners, both nationally and internationally, and the interaction between land and sea cannot be ignored. My recommendation is that we use a science-based, community-led, bottom-up approach rather than a merely top-down approach. But that approach, the bottom-up approach, needs to be led with very clear aims of what they're trying to achieve. I think at all times it's very evident when a plan is being made that for the marine space that there are people with different levels of power, different levels of funding behind them. And planners really need to understand and be mindful of the disparity in power so that they can effectively ensure that all voices are heard. It's crucial, as you can see from the Canadian example, that you have the right team leading your consultation with all of the marine users, because without the right team, a lot of the time the message will be lost, and the aims, therefore, of the Marine Spatial Plan can be hampered as a result. The communication needs to be clear, and marine planning consultation goals must be set in advance. I've been asked to talk to you today about how I'm planning on bringing this message forward about the integration of aquaculture and fisheries in the marine space with other industries and how we can really communicate and work together. And so today I want to present something that I've been working on with my business partners for the last number of years. It's a portfolio of offshore renewable energy called Tetra. And why I'm presenting this to you today is because my learnings over the last 2 years have really supported its development. There are 2 projects within this. One is called EcoDev, and EcoDev is the integration between aquaculture and fisheries on offshore renewable energy sites, so that we can produce more seafood using aquaculture production that has low impact, while also producing energy in that same space, demonstrating the multi-use of the marine space. Separately, Tetra, as a development company, have the ambition to use bioremediation and nature-based solutions to enhance the marine environment within where they work within. And so we have some really interesting projects that are specifically linked to my project, because it is all about engaging on time, appropriately, with a clear message that we want to work together. And whether that comes from policymakers or that comes from developers themselves, one thing is for sure, our Canadian example shows us that when we do work together, it can be for the benefit of the marine space and your plan. Just as another last piece, I in order to develop Tetra, we had to bring together another company called Undine, which is a precision offshore marine and aerial survey solution for offshore renewable energy, and it will work with the EcoDev project to ensure that we use a science-based approach for their development, the development of aquaculture in our wind farms. And Undine currently has 20 staff. We have a number of vessels and planes that support our activities, and we're growing. By next summer, by June of 2022, we expect that the numbers will increase to 75. So it's quite a large undertaking. I really want to thank all of the sponsors who have sponsored both myself and my fellow scholars this year, but in particular, Bordy Shkiwara, Richard Donnelly, and Karen Brosnan, and John, and everybody who's really supported us all through this journey. It was certainly different to what I had expected when I undertook it. I expected to travel, but you know, what we've learned is that you don't necessarily have to be physically present to be able to understand what's going on around the world, and people are ready to share their information with you, so I'll be eternally grateful for that. And I particularly want to thank Jeff Dooley, my mentor, who's been true inspiration to me throughout. So thank you, everyone.